So welcome to How to Be an Outsider. And what is an outsider? Well, it's someone that started out as feeling like they didn't belong, an outsider of space and place, if you will, and how they transformed that through their relationship with the outdoors, with the outside spaces, into becoming an outsider, i.e. someone who has this deep connection to the outdoors and has utilised that and is a part of their sense of belonging. I'm very excited to share stories of different outsiders within my community from different age demographics and different walks of life who were either born here or moved here or experienced the outdoors in different ways, and to tell their stories. Because often the voices of outsiders or marginalised folks are not uplifted in spaces. So I'm really honoured to get to chat with them and share that with you. In episode 1 of How to Be an Outsider, The Land and Belonging, I'm going to talk to two fantastic people. Shelley Boyd Prasad is her Indigenous name in Tsilhqot'in, and Barry Moses Sulustu. These are two Sinixt people. That's whose traditional and unceded territory we're filming this all on. It's a really interesting discussion that sort of weaves its way through belonging for people that have been displaced and discredited. And it can be uncomfortable in some ways because as a person who's new here, but I feel a great sense of belonging in this place, that the political and colonial structures that exist make me feel more comfortable than the people who have called this home since time immemorial. I hope you'll enjoy this episode and lean into the incredible power that these two speakers have to share with us. So this is the opening episode of how to be an outsider and how to reclaim a sense of belonging within the outside space, the land, and live in relationship to it. And I am an uninvited guest here and someone who's lived here for years, an environmental educator who has built relationship with this place. And one of the people that has been most instrumental in my deep connection, my understanding, the growth of my love and respect and reciprocity has been you, Shelley Boyd Prasad in Tsilhqot'in. And this topic is very emotional for me. We just watched your beautiful canoes begin their paddle journey from here at Tsilhqot'in and down to Kettle Falls, and watched that journey begin, and I felt a huge sense of love in that space. And I'm so pleased that you've honoured me by agreeing to speak about this. And I wondered if we start with this concept of being an outsider and then belonging, perhaps where that kind of sparks for you as we begin.
Limlam for just asking the question. Today, out of that whole group, that whole paddle, every single one of them except for the person in the front, that was new water to them. And we had all of those. Everyone in that canoe were Sinixt youth, except for one. He was Spokane youth. He's from the Spokane Reservation. But that connection, is something we'll talk about tonight, because that people talk more and more about the concept of, I think it's a very Western thought, right, that the land belongs to us, and we all know that. But what does that mean when you belong to the land? and the conversations around even the DNA in the land and the feelings that it sparks. I have so many people that come up and they say, I missed this place and I didn't even know I missed it. Or I'm home and I didn't even know I was away. And it's really easy to romanticize Indigenous people or Indigenous life. And the reality is, something I read I really liked, and it just this week, and it reminded me of the canoe journey, and it reminds me of this. And it said that adversity, when you meet adversity, it's really an opportunity to raise to that challenge, to raise yourself up. And I think that historically our people had to have that mentality. I mean, even before first contact, just to live, look at this place. You can't survive here and not expect adversity, even in modern times. But all the darkness that we're given, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are. It is an opportunity to learn something you can only learn in darkness. And so when we're talking about the outside, you know, in some ways we can be like, it's dark outside. But you go into that, your eyes adjust, you get to hear crickets and frogs and things you didn't, you know, nighthawks, things you didn't expect, you didn't pay attention to. You don't have the opportunity to hear and see the same way as in darkness. And I look at my community and, you know, in Chaliwam, in Chalim, you know, my late friend, Sinkalip and Virgil Seymour, he said something really beautiful. Sinaiks people were displaced 3 times. The first time we were displaced from Canada. The second time we were displaced from the lower end of our territory. And the third time we were we were displaced from Inchalim when it was inundated by the floods. And Inchalim, even by definition now, is a very remote place. But we have the strongest community. We live in the poorest county in Washington state. We are plagued by suicide, addictions, domestic violence. You know, fentanyl is hurting us deeply. But there's also a resilience and a beauty. And I can't explain what it's like for me to put those kids in a canoe and have them connect this way, because that land feeds us back. And I think that the land feeds all of us. And all we have to do is love it. All we got to do is love it. It already loves us. And I think creators like that too, right? Like, all we have to do is love. And my late husband would say, follow the truth. Those are the most important things, no matter how hard that path is. But I don't know if that answers that question from that perspective, but I do think of those things when you talked about it.
The land feeds us in so many ways, and I feel that is one of the greatest gifts that have come. I'm an environmental educator, right? Done that in different places, and when I came here 9 years ago, I didn't know anything about the Indigenous history here, or present, or medicines, or any of these things. And so all of those teachings have just been such a gift, and they have fed my soul and fed my connection and understanding. And what you're saying to me speaks to connection so deeply, and to a sense of belonging. And I have felt incredibly welcomed and cared for by you and by people in your community when I visited. And I don't know if you remember when you opened for the Classrooms to Communities conference that I helped to arrange, you also said that education is love. And as an educator, that has stuck with me. It has been shared now into many different spaces, because things like this, or having conversations both with the Indigenous youth and the non-Indigenous people in this place, to share that love and understanding and a sense of belonging between them. For me, that's the future of understanding and care, more care for each other, more care for the land. And I wonder if we were talking about the future, if you have any thoughts on what you hope for or what you see as important in the next little piece here.
It's funny, we have been fighting for ourselves, I guess you would say, even before 1956 when we were declared extinct. If you go back in the historic record, the really hard time, I would say, really goes between like the 1870s to like the 1912, 1920. I mean, those were the times, especially in Canada, it was because of the way the land is shaped. There was no space for Sinixt people. Well, I guess I shouldn't say no space. They gave us less than 1/2 square mile for a reserve on the opposite side of the Arrow Lake, where there's no road access. There were no services, no schools. The whole village was decimated by tuberculosis, basically. And even Annie Joseph herself, her husband, her 2 biological sons, and her, if you want to say stepson, we would say Luquistan, you know, they all passed of tuberculosis, not to mention most of the people who were at the Oatscott Reserve. And so I've been asked that before, and of course, you know, even though we won the case in 2016 that confirmed us as Aboriginal people of Canada, you know, it seems that Canada still pushes back and says, yeah, but you're not under the Indian Act. We won't recognize you for any kind of, we can't live here, we can't work here, we can't go to school, we can't access, you know, health care, we can't do any of those things. And that's hard, right? But I think that one of the beautiful things about this, in a crazy way, is to see the healing. You see the healing, like, from community, from people, like, saying, we don't care what the government says, we will educate ourselves, we'll find out the history, and we'll speak to that history, no matter how hard it is. And if we take that one step further, we speak to the land. What if the river had rights, the same rights we're searching for? What if the mountains had the same rights we're searching for? And that's just to exist and to be counted, to be recognized, to be considered in decisions that involve itself. And the thing about the land is that every time we do something good for the land, it benefits all of us. So what I'd like to see, you know, is all of that recognition. Honestly, I mean, I would love to see that recognition. But the beautiful part in it is, if it weren't for the adversity, in some ways, they go together. Today we paddled, and what we talked about is bringing salmon back up the Columbia River. You know, we have a saying, it's save the salmon, save the world. And I don't know how many people know this, but the Columbia River and its tributaries are probably the most dammed river in the world. 400 dams connected and directly on the Columbia. Like the Snake River goes into it, the Kootenai, like, we have huge rivers that are very dammed. So if we can overcome things like this, using our minds, using our hearts, using our conscience, following the truth, and the truth is the salmon belong here. I had a reporter earlier asking me today about, what kind of salmon came up here? And he said, sockeye? And I said, no, Chinook. And he was all like, from the ocean? And it was sad to me because, this knowledge hasn't ever left our community. You know, even though we haven't had access to salmon since 1942 on the Columbia River, but neither have the people of Nelson, neither have, not Nelson, of Castlegar, New Venver, Silverton, or Revelstoke. No one has had that that exchange and that opportunity and that understanding, because the salmon do teach us. If anyone has been blessed enough to see salmon spawning, my Tupia would say you could walk across the river on the backs of salmon. And I heard somebody from Nikas say that he's non-Indigenous, say that his old grandmother said that as well. Most of the time when you see salmon spawning now, we see it in like kokanee. But when you see Chinook, it's a different thing. The river's different. But what would that teach us? What are we holding back? What are we holding on to? And we don't need to. There is space for everyone, and we have to make space for everyone. I think as human beings, not to go to Chief Seattle on anybody, but what happens to the earth does happen to us. And so really that existence and recognition and honor and respect for everything and everyone, and maybe our price is, the hard way. And it feels good, though, to be together with what's moving is not the government, it is the people. It is the people. And my friend of mine said, once you know the truth, you have no choice. And she said, like Aristotle said that, or someone, but it reminds me of truth is ageless, and the power of truth is timeless in that aspect. And in this adversity, maybe it is not our adversity, but our opportunity. And when we're talking about being on the outside, I know for me, I've always told my kids, I would rather you be the oddball. The oddballs are the ones that do it. The oddballs change the world. If you're doing what everybody else is doing, you're going to get exactly what everybody else is doing. Stand up for who you are. Stand up for what you believe in. Learn about what you are passionate about. Follow that integrity. And I'm also, the last, piece I'll say on that is, we seem to forget that money is made up. It's not real. It's paper. You can't eat it. You can't drink it. You can't do any of those things with it. But the land, that takes care of us. That's real.
Just letting that soak in for a minute. When I first called you about this, doing this project, you were the only person of the 8 people that I had spoken to who immediately said, when I said, thinking about this theme around outsiders and belonging, and you spoke immediately about the salmon. And you were, the only human who put another relative or another being above themselves. And honestly, those Indigenous pedagogies have changed my life as a scientist by training, who was taught that, geology was the study of non-living things, to receiving knowledge about rocks as our ancestors and as the holders of story and truth, and that changing the way I teach science to kids. That concept, and this whole episode was really around that concept of us all being part of something as equals, as opposed to humans at the top of this pyramid or ladder. And the way you speak and the things you share make me feel like if that knowledge could be shared out, that we might have a healthier and more caring world for the future.
Absolutely. One of the things, I talked a little bit about this disparaging the sad things about my community, but I didn't talk about the strength of our community and that connection to the land. And even, overwhelmingly, our young people that go to college for biology, for forestry, for, ocean, studies, for things that are connected to what we'd say is real. Our leadership, Jared Erickson is our chairman. He is a wildlife biologist. Cody Dizitel, who is our executive director, is a forester and a biologist. And I think just for a moment, if people stop and consider what would the world be like if our leadership were not lawyers, we're not, business people, MBAs, but what if they were all people that understood the science of the land? My late husband, was the chairman of the Colville Confederated Tribes when he passed away in 2016. And there's so much that comes at you. I saw that from the inside of his work. You have social problems, you have education issues, you have addiction issues, you have land issues, you have wildfires now, you have all of, elder care, baby care, all of these things. And he had a really simple filter, because it's not just enough to look at that. And he'd say, what is best for the land? What is best for all the things that are wild? What is best for the people? In that order, what's best for the land and the water? What's best for the animals that are wild? And finally, what's best for us? That's, part of the reason when we do the canoe journey, it's the salmon are the first thing. That's what we want to raise that awareness for. And then the second thing is ourselves, after the water, after the salmon, we come last. But what if we all did that? We wouldn't be looking at what we're leaving our children right now. I've told you this before. One of the things that as a 62-year-old woman I am ashamed of is that we are not leaving a better world for the next generation. And we see this in politics right now. People are choosing between what do you want, money, or do you want a sustainable world? And I don't know if you'll cut this out. It's up to you. It's a political statement, but one of my elders, he was just listening to Donald Trump, and he just shook his head and he said, oh, he must not love his grandbabies. And I don't want to put that judgment on anyone, but I think that that's how we have to look. We can't be like, oh, this is best for me. I want this and this and this. We have to think about what we're leaving our babies. And I was raised, you leave your camp better than what you found it. And I feel like I'm going to leave this world not in a good camp, not a better camp than what I found it. This is not a better camp. And so we got some work to do.
I see the work that you're doing, and your groups and your organizations for the salmon, for children, for your language revitalization, even for the kids here. When you come here, and most of these kids are not Indigenous, and the love and energy that you give to them to share this place and the stories and relationship with this place with them is incredibly moving. I wonder how you think that decision makers potentially could shift their way of being. Because for me, when I have engaged in 7 generational thinking that's been taught to me about thinking 7 generations ahead and behind to make sure that we leave it better. And as a scientist, I do a thing with kids where I put the history of Earth, the geological time scale, and 4.6 billion years on a piano scale. Like if you play a piano, and I ask them how much of the piano is human, like humans have been on it. And it's 1 millimeter at the furthest end of one key. and to try and give them this understanding. We have been here for 1 millimeter of 2 meters of history, and we have changed so much. And I wonder, how do we give these decision makers, these businessmen, these money people, that sense of belonging in relationship with? How do we shift that? I mean, so that they too can come into relationship and become inside and in community with?
Well, this is a pretty harsh answer, but I think LA is showing us right now. Sometimes we have to stand up, not to shift the topic, but when we talk about Sinixt issues, in 2016 still, you couldn't say our name with Parks Canada without risking your job. And it's very political. You saw the erasure of our name starting in the early 1800s, and we would just be referred to, like there was a article in actually Revelstoke's paper calling us the dangerous Colvilles. It didn't just take away our name, who we are, but Colville is actually a man from Scotland that invested in the Hudson Bay. He's not indigenous, but it's a removal of place. Sin is the place, Aichkst is the bull trout, and the in the end is the people. So actually it's the place of the bull trout people. And it's the place is first. In our language, the thing that's important comes first. And it's really not the people of the bull trout place. It is the other way around. But, I can't go without thinking about our old stories. And in our creation stories, there's a part, I won't go into the whole creation story or anything like that, but everyone is given a gift. Every animal is given a gift. Like birds can fly, that's their superpower. Fish can swim, that's their superpower. Grizzly bears are strong. That's like, you think about, like, what would it be like to be able to swim like that or fly like that or be that strong or be that tall or be, any of those things, be that fast, be that, smell that well. But what we do is we have our minds. That's what we got. Our minds are powerful. That's what Coyote got, and we have to use them. And it is the people on the ground who have educated themselves, have gone in. I remember when I first came up here to work, and there were crazy stories like, these valleys, there were too much snow for Indian people, so there were no indigenous presence. Or I liked the one up by Nelson. It was like, this was the Valley of the Shadows, and people were afraid. Indigenous people were afraid to be here. And all of it, the whole area is, got pictographs everywhere. And I always think, well, how did you guys explain that? But the reality was it was a big mystery because it wasn't taught in school. And when you were talking earlier about education and love and power, we had a teacher in Idaho this year who was commanded to take down a poster. It was one of those posters that had all these brown hands, or all colors of hands. They weren't all brown, they went all shades. And it said everyone was welcome. And after President Donald Trump came into play, he said, anything with diversity and equity needed to be removed, and all of those things that happened. And this teacher refused. And we're seeing also people stand up, and military people of political, people standing in the streets saying, this is fascism. That's courage. But it comes through education. It comes through not taking the easy path of like, okay, well, whatever I'm taught or not taught. It's those things that don't make sense. Like, why are there pictographs and yet we're being told these things or not told these things? What is the truth? I'm not picking on any tribes here. It sounds like I am. But I came in and I had a woman from BC Hydro tell me that I didn't understand how it was in Canada. In Canada, it was shared territory. And, I said, shared territory is not a concept anywhere in the world. That's just not true. I mean, and furthermore, let's talk about the land. Everyone knows that saying, good fences make great neighbors. And these mountains are amazing fences. And they created great neighbors, and that's why you see a Sinai's history that's so grounded in just one tribe. I mean, if we look at 1811 to 1846, which is traditional territory definition, and that's not the point, and please feel free to cut any of these things out, but the point is, it took people to educate themselves because it's not an easy history, and especially when it's been covered over, to look and to learn and to stand up to officials and say, no, that's not true. And just like in the States, where people are saying, humans are human, and what's happening in LA is because of outside people, right? We don't get in, those foreigners, those immigrants, those whatever they label them in a negative connotation. I resonate with that because I see it in our history because we became them. Actually, we were called those foreigners and all of those things. But that's the kind of propaganda that comes out. Now, let's look at the land from that perspective. How has the land been, I hate to say dehumanized, but you said it yourself, that teaching from purely a scientific perspective of what we know or what we can prove is the only truth. And yet there are a million things we can't explain. In our language, we talk about a kind of sacredness. You go, you pray, that's sacred. We know that. But then there's other sacrednesses, that speak to the unusual way. When you are grieving a friend or you're at a loss for whatever, and then an eagle, swoops by and drops a feather down to you. That's a sacred moment. But if you're not open to what that message is, you miss it completely. And those are the things we miss.
It's quite interesting because I keep having interactions with eagles, and actually an eagle feather dropped from the sky in front of my feet. I was near Castlegar, actually, where we had the salmon ceremony. And because of the teachings, because of the reading, and this is one of the things that in this podcast I really wanted to highlight, was that when I came here, I just started. So firstly, white privilege, immigration. I'm an immigrant, but it was easy because I am white. I speak English as my first language, and I am welcomed because I've been through education systems that are respected. So I recognise I am beyond privileged. And so in these spaces, I have had time, but I just set myself, the first year that I was here, was like, I'm only going to read Indigenous authors. I'm only going to listen to Indigenous speakers. And it basically just blew apart my degree, honestly, Shelley. I was like, that was a waste of money. That was very expensive, few years, because it took all of these objective, non-relationship, no kinship, no feeling. And firstly, it destroyed my creativity, which I'm just coming back into. But the love that exists in the teachings that have been shared with me, the Indigenous ways of being, that exist in lots of published spaces, right? I'm, of course, having a relationship with elders, but also you're busy in community, right? You're busy working through your own needs and desires and projects. And so for me, just going out, finding, especially if you can, authors from your local First Nations, but just investing your time and energy in that, it has changed the way that I live my life. Every year, me and my friends, the guy behind the camera is one of them, one of my greatest, we we paddle Sinhunhuitkwa, the Swift River. We paddle for about 12 miles down here. And last year was the first year that I felt brave enough with that group of people, mostly Canadian, all non-Indigenous except for one, but he was adopted out of his culture. And I brought tobacco, and I asked that we did a prayer before we got into the boats, and that I had been taught to offer our gratitude, to offer our respect and our love before we went on that journey. And I kind of expected all these 30-year-olds to be a bit squirmy and a bit uncomfortable because they're not in the kind of world that I'm in. I'm in this educational land-based learning space. And every single one of them opened their arms and their hearts and loved that moment, and it brought us together more as folks. So I wanted to say, as we come maybe meandering towards the close, is that the deepest sense of gratitude, Liam Lim, thank you for that education and love, for that lessons of community and care, because they have changed my life, and I hope those in my circle and outside of those circles. So when I asked you, like, what can we do to get it out there, I know that there's like bottom-up work being done in my community with people, and I just hope that it's infectious and that we stand up and that we use our voices, and that's kind of the hope of this.
Well, Liam Limpt, I love that you did that, and I'm going to push back on you a little bit, though. You know, you didn't just you didn't blow your education apart. Sometimes it needs to be burnt so that it can get cleaned off, and then it goes to that next level. You've added something to it. You know, it wasn't for nothing, and I think that that's the part. You know, we can't get stuck in the beauty. You know, we have to also look at we got to look at climate change. We got to look at the social issues. You know, for my community, I have to look at those things. We've got to look at the river in a very practical way, and, you know, how much pollution, how much mercury, how much whatever is in that water. That knowledge is very, very valuable, as is that other side of it. You know, I'm going to kind of end with, you know, that the word silk, you know, that siwant is to us, that speaks to the water. So this is, I think, a knowledge that all people really hold. We happen to have our word for water encased in it, but it's like, you have a question, you're troubled by something, you go to the water, you talk to it, you ask it, and it's going to help you. But that just adds to your knowledge, and then you do the action. Whether it is floating with Sinaiks in honor of salmon and the existence of a race of people, or whether it is getting down there and working on that river in a very scientific way to clean it up. All of those things are valuable. And it's funny, I just came across this quote. I'm going to pull it up, and then I'm going to have you read it because I don't have my glasses. But I think it is pertinent to what we're saying here. And okay, there you go. And Liam Limpt for this interview.
Have you ever heard of the word panpsychism? Panpsychism? It suggests all of nature and the entire universe has a conscience. I absolutely believe that. And Einstein worked on that, his theory of interconnected consciousness, right? That we are all just energy vibrating. If you look at the makeup of us, we don't really exist. The bench doesn't exist, the microphone doesn't exist. But yet here we are, together, in this moment. And I have to say that getting to know you has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. And I am so grateful for your knowledge, and that this next are still here.
Puti Kuala, Liam Limpt. We are still here.
My name is Sulu Stu, and I'm from the Spokane tribe in Washington State. I'm also a descendant of the Sinaiks and the Kalispel. And I was raised with many of our traditional teachings. And all of our creation stories, there were agreements that were made before the beginning of time or before the beginning of the human world, agreements between humans and I guess nowadays we would call nature, so between humans and the animal people, between the fish, the waters, the mountains, and everybody has a job and everybody has a responsibility in that system, and everybody made certain agreements. So my father and my elders and my teachers, they always talked to me about that agreement, and that agreement was something that kept everything in balance between nature and humans. And so as part of that, we the animals and the fish and the different species in nature, they gave themselves as part of that agreement, to be food and medicine for the people. And in exchange for that, there were certain ceremonies and songs and rituals and things that we performed to honor and give thanks to that. And so it was a mutual agreement. So we take care of them, they take care of us. And that's our connection. I think what it means to me to be indigenous is actually that agreement that we have with the land. So when we're in a place, we as indigenous people have been in those places, as they say, from time immemorial, thousands, tens of thousands of years. And that agreement has had time to live and breathe and grow and develop. Part of the problem of the modern world is that with being relocated, being pushed from our traditional territories, is that agreement has been broken, whether it's by our will or whether it's by just a force of history. Those agreements are broken, and suffering is always the result of that lack of integrity or that loss of integrity. I really feel that one of the great problems of our time is that in deep history and indigenous history, every place in the world had its people that they were caretakers, in a sense, of that agreement in that place, and it helped to keep nature in balance. It helped to keep the mountains and the foods and the rivers in balance. But now with human populations moving all over the places and industrial societies, indigenous peoples, tribal peoples have slowly begun to forget those agreements. They see them simply as culture. They see them simply as costume and dance and whatever, when in fact it's actually an integral part of keeping the world in balance. And so there was kind of a dark teaching, actually, that I received from one of my elders, that when the last people on earth forgets its ceremony, when the last people on earth forgets its agreement, then the world will end. And so part of my mission, and I work with language revitalization, part of my mission is to help our little corner of the world remember our language, remember our teachings, remember our stories, and to remember our part of that agreement. And our part of that agreement is different than on the plains. It's different than in Asia, different than in Australia, or different than wherever. It's just our little corner of the world where we're keeping that agreement alive, through our stories, through our language, through our teachings, through our songs. And it's not that anybody can copy that, but they can take inspiration from that. And I always encourage people everywhere, regardless of what their cultural background is to begin to build those relationships again. And to the degree that you can remember what your own ancestral lineage is, what your own part of that agreement is. And sometimes, in modern times, there are people who, it's like we're orphans in many places in the world. We don't know where we come from. We don't know many times, who we are or what our ceremonies are or what our medicines are, what our teachings are. So for many people in the modern world, it's just simply getting out in nature, and start with an introduction. Hello. Why? My name is, yeah, whatever that is, and for many people, it's about establishing that relationship again. So that's what I can say about that.
No, you better do it. Just don't fall. Just don't fall in, Swawasa.
Yeah, do it intentionally.